Good evening and welcome to the Monday, April 17th, Muscatine School District Board of Education meeting. Madam Secretary, can you please take roll and help us determine the quorum, please?
Sure. Directors Connard.
Here.
Cooney.
Here.
DeBeat.
Here.
LaRue.
Here.
Morgan.
Here.
Phillips. Here. Shore.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Tonight, we have Ms. Heather Knowles, kindergarten class from Madison Elementary School. Thank you. That's really a nice pledge here. Thank you. We really and truly appreciate that. The next item on our agenda is the public hearing for the certification of the FY24 budget. Can we have a motion to open the public hearing, please?
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Madam Secretary, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Directors Connard.
Aye.
Cooney.
Aye.
DeBeat.
Aye.
LaRue.
Aye.
Morgan.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Shore.
Aye.
Thank you. So now it's time to have a discussion, if we have any discussion. Also, did we receive any communication written? Or, okay, we did not. Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, so now we have a motion to close the public hearing.
I make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Madam Secretary, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Directors Connard.
Aye.
Cooney.
Aye.
DeBeat.
Aye.
LaRue.
Aye.
Morgan.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Shore.
Aye.
Thank you. Moving forward with our agenda, first of all, we would like to welcome everybody to the chamber tonight, visitors, media, everybody here. So it's nice always to see a big crowd attending the board meetings. With that, we move into the student school board representative reports, and we have Gabe, I think, via technology, virtual, and then Caleb, please.
This is Gabe Salazar here with your student report, and as you guys notice, I'm not in the meeting with you, but I am on stage here with this wonderful musical set, which leads me to my point that I'm reminding all of you to make sure to stop by to see the Drowsy Chaperone here at Muscatine High School, the 20th, 21st, and the 22nd. Make sure you buy your tickets at muscatinehs.booktix.com. And with that student update, we would just like to say that the students are all pretty excited. The seniors are very appreciative of the guidance counseling that we have available at MHS, helping us get ready for our secondary education. And just a huge thank you to our school district for supporting us all through our 4 years. And that is all that I have for this week. Thank you, guys.
Caleb, do you have anything to share with us?
I do. My report's going to come off a bit more serious, if you will. I'd like to discuss the security issue we had at our high school on March 21st. I believe it's important to share the student perspective on these events. I believe that's my job here. I'd like to preface this by saying that although this threat turned out to be fake, it was very much real in the time that it was happening as far as our procedures go and as far as being a useful tool to point out what we did well and what we do need to improve on. Starting with what went well, Muscatine Police Department responded exactly how we would hope them to, and we are very thankful for their swift bravery. They responded in just a few short minutes and had the school locked down and entered the school immediately. Our problems were mostly found at the classroom, individual classroom level. The communication with teachers, it was minimal. Our staff was not continually informed and updated as the situation developed, which presents an issue as to properly protect their students. Staff members need to be communicated with frequently. We can't be leaving our teachers with their primary source of information being Facebook on their phones versus real accurate information that could come from administration or security. I've spoken with staff members who said they locked down their classrooms, but without communication had no idea how to further protect their students from whatever threat that there was. They weren't informed of what it would be at the time. A portion of our classrooms were locked down properly, meaning doors locked and possibly barricaded, lights off, quiet, students in a corner or safe part of the room away from windows, and prepared to evacuate the classroom if necessary. However, I'd like to point out that most classrooms, I would even say the majority of classrooms were missing at least one of those criteria, which obviously is an issue because we can't have a single classroom that is vulnerable during if a situation like this were to really occur. We can't afford poor planning and disorganization and not a clear expectation for our staff as to what needs to be carried out in a situation like this. There were several factors that contributed to this. There are a lot of areas of our building that don't have a PA that comes on or a clear PA at all. For example, the entire STEM wing of our building, the PA is very fuzzy in there. Not a single teacher had a clue what had been announced or what was going on because the announcement could not be heard over whatever noise of their classroom was happening. That means, I believe, 10 classrooms were totally unprepared for any sort of threat at all. And the classroom that I was in a different part of the building does not have a PA. And so our teacher had to get a phone call from another staff member about having to stop what we were doing and get locked down. And that part is awful, but a worse part is there were classrooms that heard the announcement and were aware of the need for a lockdown, but maybe didn't do anything, maybe at most just locked their doors or turned off their lights and kept teaching, which is, in my opinion, completely unacceptable. These children were by windows, exposed to a potential gunman, and that just can't happen. Maybe I'm alone, but safety to me should be the number one priority when it comes to our classrooms. I don't think there's anything we teach, although we learn valuable information. I don't think there's anything we teach that should take priority over lockdown and safety. As I'm sure you're all aware, we had our conditions for learning survey, and one of the questions on there is if you feel it's a strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree for the statement, I feel safe at school. And I'm guessing, given what happened less than a month ago and how those our security procedures were not carried out properly in a majority of classrooms, that we definitely didn't score well in that area. Success in this scenario can't be a 70% or 80%, 90%, 95% security. We need to be 100% safe because you never know what classrooms a gunman could target. So I believe that we need to take a further look at what we're doing across all of our buildings to make sure that as these threats arrive, we are taking care of them properly.
Caleb, do you have you guys had active shooter drills?
No.
You haven't had any this year yet?
No.
Okay.
So one of the things, Caleb, I appreciate you sharing those things, that I will say is I do know Mr. Hoganson has followed up. They've had meetings right after that incident, talked about all of those things that you had talked about were addressed. We know, especially in the Van Heck Center, it sits away from the building and also has music playing typically while they're working out, and that interferes with the PA system. So Ryan's been involved with those conversations, and I think communication's always important. And you know, again, our sheriff's department, our police department response was fantastic. They were in the building before we knew what was going on, which also is a communication piece. And so, you know, we have been working with the Muscatine Police Department to identify a communication tool that can be used by all staff that would also connect to students and to our families, that in the event any staff member can create an alert, whether it's fire, tornado, or not tornado, fire, could be a health issue, and we've had some health issues at the high school, or it could be an active threat, an active shooter. It also contacts police. It would contact all staff members. They can text through that system. So we've been looking at several different systems in order to get something in place. It also works on, you know, if there were an issue, obviously we have to, you know, after the incident, identify where students are at, where that relocation zone is, how to connect them with, you know, parents or family members. This system also, and several of them do, but this system also works with geomapping, so we can know where in the building where that issue is and how to better respond to that. So, you know, again, I think, you know, anytime, and again, it was, I think we should feel fortunate with the quick response because we know ultimately that's what makes the difference. But there's always things to improve on. And so
I'd like to add a little bit to that. And because I know of one student that they didn't actually realize what was going on, and they are using their phones just joking around and things like that. But I think part of that comes to the fact that everybody may have thought it was more like a drill. You know, they didn't understand really the seriousness of what could have happened. And it's unfortunate that we have to think that way, but we do need to start thinking long past drill, but as in looking at it like that 100% you're talking about, as in making sure everybody understands what their part is on it.
I just want to say that I really appreciate that you bring the hard topics. I think, you know, we've talked about some things that have been solutions, but I hope that there's even more than that, because even with everything in place, we're going to keep messing up, right? So, I mean, really, so that we keep having that. And I think it's pretty admirable that you sat here and said all of those hard things, especially as a high school student. I wouldn't have been that brave. So I hope that our actions after this, you feel that you were really heard and valued. We can't solve it here, of course, right now, but so I just think really good job. I hadn't heard the perspective of a student, but we've heard from those first responders that were in there right away. And the good news is that they were overall impressed with how you all did. So even if it seemed like chaos in the moment, you guys, once you knew what you were supposed to do, you responded really well. So I think that speaks to all of your safety. You don't want to be making adult decisions in that moment, but you guys did it. So I think that's pretty great. And then do we have the PA systems working, or we're just coming up with the other?
So I think there's also an issue of how to, which again, they've talked about how to lock down and secure certain areas of the building where there's a lot of glass, where there's, you know, like the Van Heck Center. So they've come up with procedures for that. And I know that from a facility standpoint, you know, we're finding a solution for that PA system as well.
And I think some of that obviously needs to be private and not discussed in a public forum. So I'm sure Ryan and his team are having all of those conversations. So then the other being that you could probably even just nod if you have, do you have a drill scheduled at the high school in the near future?
Yeah, the first one was October 25th in shooter lockdown.
I guess you cannot just nod, sorry.
So the first intruder lockdown drill, I just looked at my sheet, was October 25th at the high school. It was 10:10 in the morning, lasted for 10 minutes. But we're gonna, we have another one scheduled. So there's 2 intruder lockdown drills per year, along with the 2 fire drills in a semester, 2, tornado drills per semester. So we have that charted because we're responsible to that to the state. So we have all that recorded.
Do you think, I mean, maybe you were absent that day, right? So is there a reason students wouldn't have known that that happened?
It's in October and they're high school kids. I mean,
Yeah, no, it's fine. I just didn't know if there was follow-up, if it would come out in like the next daily announcement.
probably
like-
not.
Okay.
Probably not.
I know what you're talking about now. Yeah, I remember. It was essentially like they made the announcement and then we locked the doors, turned the lights off, and kept doing what we're doing. Yeah. So it was a minor thing.
So,
but not
but
really.
still probably not complete procedure.
was not
so
like
we're going to
full
have to
scale,
address
yeah.
that.
Okay,
So-
perfect. And I don't hear about the high school a lot. I know the elementary schools went through similar situations where the facilities team came in. And I'm saying this too because I think we should know the big picture a little bit, that it is being done well in some places. So we have room for improvement, it sounds like, at the high
Yeah,
school.
and
but-
so right now we're going through Alice retraining again, just like we do every year. We just are starting with the elementary buildings. We'll continue that with the high school building, and then we'll go back in and do lockdown drills with them as well. So, and that'll be with Angela, Whitney, myself, where we go in and we lock down the building, check doors, do all those things. So,
So that's with our school resource officers.
yeah, I apologize. Sorry. Thank you. Clint.
Do we have the capability to send out a mass announcement through the phone system to everybody's classroom? To make some kind of a
And that's kind of what we're talking about too, with that type of system would do that.
Okay.
It would also, again, the challenge is not every student is in the classroom. Some kids are in the hallway, right?
Right,
So
right.
who's getting them into a safe location? And whether it's a active, intruder situation or a fire, things are going to happen. Kids are going to be in different places, and how do we account for them?
So what about like a Susan Clark? Didn't we just upgrade the phone system there? Does that have that capability?
Yeah, so
Or do we
so
have to
yes,
upgrade that
we
more?
can call into every phone in the district. However, like some classrooms, it's just not loud enough over the, like, if I called into the Van Heck weight room,
Right,
between
right, yeah.
music and banging weights, not going to hear the phone ring necessarily. So we're looking at other options, whether that be a visual alarm, whether it be a cutoff switch that cuts music, and then allows us to hear the PA system. So there's different options we're looking at right now to address some of those issues that we know came up from the
Right,
the
but I guess
swatting.
what I'm asking is, we just upgraded the system at Susan Clark.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have that capability with that upgraded system?
We've upgraded the entire phone system throughout the entire district. So we can call into any phone in the district with that.
Okay.
But most of what you're talking about right now is an app that's on your cell phone.
Correct. Or
And
it can be-
if I understand what the app is, it goes off like a siren. You cannot turn it off until you
avoid it.
address it, correct?
Yeah.
So if you're sitting in a classroom and anybody that wants to be part of it, all of a sudden you have 1 or 10 or 30 sirens go off, you're going to know I need to address this right now. So it's instant notification to the people to go off. That's my understanding of, and I have a little bit of knowledge in this area.
So do we have, when we do the active shooter drills, are the staff, do they know that that's a practice day? I think we need to do
Yeah,
that randomly.
we've tried to do away with surprise intruder drills, just because we know that people react very strongly to those. So they are planning, we have them planned, we've talked about them. They know that they're going through them. So that this isn't, don't have any surprise drills planned. I mean, if that's something that the board wants me to look at, then we'll have that discussion, but.
I think
That's a slippery slope.
And
It really
everything we
is.
do is in conjunction with the police department, and they are great partners,
Right, right.
And so, again, it was a scary situation, and they always are. And we're, I'm grateful that it was just a swatting event. It's always an opportunity to improve, right? And we didn't wait until, that day, we were meeting with PD to go through, here's what happened, here's what went well, here's what didn't go well. Again, Mr. Hoganson was reaching out to staff, setting up conversations, letting staff provide feedback of what went well, what didn't go well, and how do we start addressing those right away so that we can be better prepared. So, as you know, things aren't always going to go well, but when you have those, you use them as opportunities to get better. And certainly, the communication piece is something we have been talking about and need to get in place. We also have that advantage that have kind of finished up those assessments for each of our buildings in terms of security, that outside group that was sponsored by the state for all the districts in the state of Iowa. They've given their recommendations. We've gone back, met with the buildings. Now we'll have kind of a district debrief around that. And then we have access to $50,000 per building. Out of those $50,000 funds, we can add cameras, we can add additional, whatever it is that we determine is most needed. We know a big part of that need is that communication tool, and so we would have funds to access some of that as well.
Well, I would like to echo everybody's points, as a matter of fact, and thank you, Caleb, for bringing up, as Lindsay mentioned here, a tough subject to talk about. Yes, 100% safety measure is what we look for. It cannot be 99%, and I'm sure, you know, thank God we didn't have any harms that day, but also that was also a lesson for all of us to learn from and to improve from what happened. So thank you for bringing up this issue. Thank you.
Caleb, a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Last month on your report, you had mentioned some of the health concerns too in the school, and that staff were noticing that and students were just feeling a little nervous. Do you feel like that has gone down a little bit?
Either I don't know if about declined in frequency.
I don't mean the
of these.
incidents, just your feelings, and that you have staff
I think
that are.
people have grown used to it a little bit, so I don't know whether that's a good or bad thing, but or neither at all. But yeah, it's become a typical thing, which is slightly concerning, but you know.
Well, Caleb, I just want some verification here. You said like it became like a typical thing. What do you mean by?
Well, I mean, we have probably some sort of medical emergency every day almost, so I would say people have figured out how to, like, okay, well, now we leave the classroom and we wait out in the hall while it happens. It's not a strange thing anymore, I guess I would say.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other question? But thank you for your report. We truly appreciate that. Okay, our next item on our agenda, Citizen Speaks. If anyone in the audience wants to address the board, please step to the podium, state your name and address. Obviously, you will have 3 minutes, and would like to remind everybody that per Iowa code, we cannot respond or engage in any discussion. Anybody would like to address the board? Okay. Moving forward, with that, we move into board targets, goals report. Item A, students will graduate prepared for post-secondary options. Item B, Muscatine schools will utilize resources effectively and equitably. Item C, students will learn in a positive and supportive environment. And under this, we have 2 items. Item 1, literacy adoption presentation, and I will call the team is ready to present, right?
Yes,
Thank
we
you,
are.
Joelle, and your team. So.
All right. Well, first of all, I do have a great team behind me. I just wanted to introduce them. Hannah Mackey, who has been working a lot of time and hours on our literacy adoption. Where's Hannah? Oh, there's Hannah. And Stephanie Zillig, who's the principal at Madison. Corey Spees joined us as the principal from Franklin. I have Vaughn Danielson, first grade from Madison. Deanna Swales, kindergarten Madison. Connie Hurlbutt, 5th grade, Rachel Fallon, Susan Clark, and Miranda Dobson, Susan Clark, and Randy Guerrera from the high school. And they're going to be the most important ones speaking after, not that Hannah's not important, but they're the teachers that are going to be speaking for most of our presentation. But Hannah and I just want to give you a brief overview of our process.
Like Joelle said, we don't want to take up a lot of time with this part because you want to hear from the teachers that actually engaged with the curricular materials that we're looking at. So we wanted to give you just a brief overview again of our process that we used. The last time we were together, we were just on phase 2. So we went through that prepare phase and the research phase. Now we're clear up to phase 6. So after researching, we made a plan for the pilot, then piloted the plan, made a final selection, and came to consensus at all grade levels. And now we're in the part where we are making an implementation plan and communicating to our stakeholders. So Joelle and Stephanie will go a little bit more in depth on each of those steps.
Okay, so just a reminder, we had 3 different committees. The first committee was our oversight committee. And that committee originally it was made up of about 33 staff members. And that committee looked at ed reports, research, and selected the top 4 curriculum choices for us. Then we had a selection committee that actually evaluated the curriculum materials using a rubric. And they made then just a recommendation to the oversight committee on their top 2 choices. And then we had the pilot schools that actually piloted these top 2 choices. We had 33 members on our oversight committee. We had 65 staff members on our selection committee, and we had 41 teachers and 22 secondary staff members that actually piloted. So we feel very happy that we had a lot of teacher voice in this process, and I will give them an opportunity just to share here at the end. So the oversight committee selected, these were the 4 that we started with. At K-5, it was Into Reading, CKLA, EL, Wonders, and then our secondary had selected our 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th through 12th had their top 4 choices were Amplify, Intellit, My Perspectives, and Springboard. So again, those were all based on ed reports and the research. Those 4 went to the selection committee. The selection committee then met with a rep from all of those programs to learn more about each program. Again, they used the rubric that I talked about. Then those materials that they chose were placed at the board office for stakeholders to view. So out of the selection committee, these were the choices that went to the pilot schools. So at K-5 were these 2 choices. 6th, 9th through 12th looked at Into Lit and My Perspectives, and 7th and 8th chose My Perspectives and Springboard. So then we went to the actual plan.
Yes, so Mr. Spees and I were lucky enough, along with Mrs. Turner, to pilot at the elementary level. So McKinley, Madison, and Franklin, along with Susan Clark and the high school, we were chosen to pilot. We were able to do that over the course of 4 weeks for 2 separate instances. And I do want to echo what Joelle said about we felt as administrators that we had a very organized system. We had check-in points that Hannah created for our teachers over the course of every week. We had training at the beginning of the process, check-ins on a weekly basis, and then we had feedback at the end of that pilot process. And she was pretty persistent in seeking that feedback from all of our staff, as well as we ended up with student feedback too. That was amazing. So I really would give her props for her organization in that way. It was a very smooth process. I also want to recognize the fact that we had, as Joelle mentioned, all of our teachers piloting, including about 10% of our teachers being year one teachers. So these are new to the district teachers, and they were given this task and embraced the task of piloting a new curriculum. So a shout out to them, because that is not an easy it wasn't from a veteran teacher perspective. And so from a new teacher, I was really pleased with that. So like she said, a unit from each program was piloted. We had training set up, and then we as administrators got to do walkthroughs. We also asked teachers from non-pilot schools to come over and see what the pilot looked like. And so we had kind of paired up schools and had them come over and be able to see what that looked like in action. And I will tell you, when the teachers talk a little bit about the student feedback, it was pretty evident how they felt. And that was really fun to see them have a voice. And so we came back together again, getting feedback from staff and students. We had over 400 student responses, which tells us that we were getting great response back from students, and that's not easy to do. But at all levels, it was great. And so, and then we met as a district oversight committee, using that feedback to make final recommendations.
I'm going to turn it over. I wanted to say also that the feedback that Stephanie alluded to was just from our elementary students. We also had feedback from junior high and high school, so we took a lot of time looking at their feedback as well. So I'm going to call up Deanna, Vaughn, and Connie, and they're from the elementary perspective, and we just asked them to share about their experience with the pilot, and then if you have questions for each group, you can ask. So.
This right, I'm good. You can. A little short here. So during the CKLA pilot, Madison Kindergarten taught skills 6 and knowledge 3. So there's 2 different components to that CKLA. Skills 6 focused on blending, spelling, and reading practice. My students and I really loved the routines that were built within the lessons. So part of it was the warm-up. 2 parts that they loved. First, they loved being able to blend sounds together to make words, and not just the 3 sounds and 4 sounds that we're used to, but we also added 5 sounds in there, which is pretty awesome for kindergarten. The other part that they really enjoyed was our sound spelling review. So I'd have these giant letter cards, and they would say the sound, then the letter, say the sound, then the letter. And they would get so good at it that I'd have to mix them up and do different things. And they'd be like, hold on a second. That was not in the right order, just some fun different things for them. They also loved all of the other materials we used, including chaining folders to create words that have either the same sound or the ending sound, like pan, pant, or rust, bust. And they really enjoyed reading the decodable that came with it. So in fact, when the pilot was over, several of the students went, oh man, but do we still get to read these books? So you could tell that they really enjoyed them. And then as a teacher, I really found the additional support pages at the end were great for remediation and differentiation. Kind of gave me some more ownership as far as what I'm teaching in the classroom with a nice research-based curriculum. The other part that we did was Knowledge 3, which was more of our reading component with stories. So we read stories like Chicken Little, The 3 Little Pigs, Goldilocks, and The 3 Billy Goats Gruff. My students were so engaged when we read each one and actively participated, including repeating phrases. And they really enjoyed the story comprehension questions and being able to sequence stories and write about their reading.
So in first grade, so it's split between skills and knowledge. So for our skills, they had a booklet for that. We worked on the phonics, the OO sound, the OU, the OI, and the AW. That was in 4 weeks. My students did really well with those. I felt like they really, really had that at the end. Then the language was part of that also. We did verbs and nouns, and the writing process, I liked that. They talked about the planning, the drafting, and the editing. That was whole group. In small group, we had the decodables, like Deanna was talking about. They were fables. The kids loved those. They felt that they were able to read them. When it was over, they wanted to keep reading those decodables. There was also take-home stories then that they could take out of the booklets and they could take home and read them. So I would have them read it 3 times and then have a parent sign it and bring it back. The parents were engaged with that also. Then in the knowledge part of it, this was my favorite part. I think it was the kids' favorite part too. So it was fairy tales and fables. And what was so neat was we could incorporate so many different things. Like the first 3 stories we read, Cinderella was one of them, The Girl with the Red Slippers, and then Billy Beg. So then we took out a map, and then we found where those stories came from. First time I could really use that map this year, and the kids loved it. We talked about the 7 continents. I had a student come back 3 days later, and she remembered all of those continents, and they were just really engaged with that. After the 3 stories, then they compared those 3 stories, and then it went on to another 3 stories. So it was those 3 stories that I talked about. Then it was Tom Thumb, Thumbelina, and I'm probably going to say this wrong, Asun Boshi, which was from Japan, the 1-inch boy. So they were all related. And then Little Red Riding Hood, Hugo Poix, and Solani. Those 3 were all connected also. And so they were making lots of text-to-text connections. They really, really were engaged with this. And when we were done, like Deanna said, they wanted to keep doing it. They were sad that it was over, so.
Okay, and in 5th grade, we did Unit 4, which was about the adventures of Don Quixote. He is a knight, and we got to talk about how it's a parody and what a parody is, and just really get some background knowledge of the Middle Ages and kind of what happened there to start us off. And I really think the 5th graders said it best. I just have a couple things from their survey that Hannah had us take. A couple of things they said was, I like the topic. Can we do this next year? I like how we got to do things with the teacher and not things always on our own. I like the story. It was something different because normally you see modern day stories, so it's different how we got to read a book from the mid-1600s. Amplify is a really good program. I hope we can keep doing Amplify. And my favorite parts of this ELA program were learning new words that I sometimes have never heard before. Those are straight from those surveys. So I thought that was really fun to go through those. And in 5th grade, we had a couple different components. We had the whole group component of reading the story, and it could be the teacher read the story one day, the next day the students read some passages, or they read it together. But there was a very good mix of how to incorporate the story. There was grammar, there's writing, vocabulary. There's also morphology, which they thought was really cool. Where do words come from and things. Most students were hooked after the first lesson. Honestly, at first sight of just this unit, it is a book from the 1600s, so there's not a lot of color. So at first they were kind of like, are you sure about this? But then after the first lesson, they were really excited. This curriculum builds really good background knowledge. For a class I'm taking, I really dug deep into this curriculum and looked in the curriculum and kind of went from kindergarten up through 5th grade to see how it progresses. And like the kindergarten, 1st grade teachers were saying, they did fables, and then in 1st grade you move up to fairy tales, and then there's just a nice progression throughout the grade levels that works really well. And it was nice that since we started in 5th grade, we didn't really have all that background knowledge, but the very first lesson, we read a passage that they should have read in 4th grade if they would have had that to give us some more background knowledge, which was really helpful. I too like the take-home material. At conferences, I get a lot of what can we do at home. This has things you can do at home. You can tear out these pages and it tells you exactly what to do, and it's not homework or things you have to bring back, but it's just things that you can work on at home. And I really like how the end of the unit assessment
used the same topics as what we read about. So it was about knights and chivalry and medieval and things that we've already read about and discussed, so they could read it well. Throughout the curriculum too, there's a lot of good stopping points and checkpoints throughout each lesson. We can use these total participation techniques that we learned about in these little quick checks and things throughout the lesson as well.
Hi, I'm Rachel Fallon. I teach 8th grade at Susan Clark Junior High. And you guys can.
And I'm Miranda Dobson, so I teach 7th grade ELA at Susan Clark Junior High as well. Go ahead.
Yeah. So we, as you can see, piloted My Perspectives and Springboard, which is what we're currently using. And so our first choice was Springboard, and we are continuing with this curriculum for a variety of reasons. We really enjoy the backwards design, so every unit kind of begins with the end in mind. So this process includes the students as well. So we look at what are our skills, what are we going to be doing at the end of the unit, what's the assessment, is it an argumentative essay, is it going to be giving a speech? So the students kind of know what that's going to look like up front, and then we kind of go back to the beginning and we do activities where we kind of help them reach that end goal to write a successful paper, give a successful speech, whatever the case may be. So we were really intrigued by the backwards design. We also thought that the curriculum had very clear learning targets, so it's sort of broken down into activities, and each activity has very specific learning targets written at the top, which we found lacking in the other curriculum choice that we piloted. We also have enjoyed the strategies that Springboard has provided. A lot of the strategies are embedded, and then in the back of the book and even on our virtual textbook, teachers can kind of get access to a lot of different strategies that they might want to use for an activity. So in the teacher wrap section, they provide you with suggestions on how to do that activity. They give you suggestions for differentiation, but then if you feel like something different is needed for your classroom, there's kind of a bank of strategies for you to pull from if you want to. So those are some of the highlights that we enjoy about Springboard, and Miranda has some others.
Yeah, just really to echo a lot of what Rachel had said, I know speaking for 7th grade, a big highlight is that we can work with the students. There's a lot of strategies to identify the standards that they're going to be assessed on at the end of the unit. And there is so much formative assessment already built into each unit, so that by the time we get to that summative assessment, I feel that the students are very confident with the standards, and I feel confident giving that assessment because I have had checks along the way that help prepare them for that assessment. And there's no confusion once we get there, or disconnect between the lessons, because it's clearly laid out at the very beginning, and we're constantly working towards that, so they're very familiar with what they're going to be asked to do at the end. I also feel that a lot of the readings, there's a lot of variety, but it also all ties back into what they're being expected to do. So like Rachel pointed out, if they're being asked to do some sort of expository writing, they are reading a lot of research, and they're reading as a writer, so they can see how a writer would write in this type of writing, so that they're able to model that in their own writing when they get to that summative assessment at the end. Yeah, we really enjoyed that and a lot of the strategies. And something going forward, which we hope to implement later on with Springboard, are a lot of those extra workbooks, like Rachel had touched on, with some of those strategies to help differentiate even further than what the textbook itself already provides, as well as some new online components that we learned a little bit about in a training that we had attended earlier this year, but it looks like they're adding a lot of new things too, to just better implement some online components as well for Springboard.
Hello, I'm Randy Guerra. I'm the English department chair at the high school. The teachers who piloted into Lit, that was their #1 selection. They're excited about the transition, as it will give them a consistent framework, up-to-date materials, and digital tools that help students become better readers and writers. I know at the last meeting I presented at, there was some questions about teacher autonomy, but we're confident in this program and have been assured that we'll have the freedom from the district to make the instructional choices inside the unit, in all the units. In fact, the training we received thus far has shown us how to meet the needs of the learners while staying on the same page as the department, and the training has been really good. We learned a lot, and we're looking forward to the implementation of it next year. And I know it might just seem like we're just saying that, but honestly, we are pretty excited about it. That being said, like students enrolled in AP or concurrent classes are not going to use it because they got to follow the curriculum guidelines from College Board or Muscatine Community College. And so they'll use existing textbooks, anthologies, materials, but a writing program that comes with Intellit will be used through 9th through 12th grade, or really 6th through 12th. And it's like AI instruction and peer revision. And a lot of times these programs are incredibly clunky and don't work that well, but this was absolutely amazing how it could help the students. The students really liked it. They looked forward to it. The teachers really took to it also. So yeah, we're pretty enthusiastic about it.
All right, so we made our final recommendations have been shared with teachers, but they will be shared with other stakeholders, including you all, moving forward. And we are working on the implementation plan for this coming school year. It's being developed as we speak. And this, in the May board meeting, you will have more information, hear more information from Joelle about the financial aspect of the adoption. Now, if you have any questions, you may ask anybody.
I'll put on my elementary parent hat. So I have a first grader and a fifth grader. So a couple of you have taught them. And I was really hoping that it would be Amplify because, are you all coming up? Sorry. At first, my fifth grader said, Journeys is all I've ever known. I don't know how I'll do another one. And he was a little dramatic about it, which was funny because I didn't even know kids paid attention to what their curriculum was. And he came home and he said, I do not want to read this book. There are no pictures in it. I'm like, you're in fifth grade. What picture books are you reading anyway? But he was really excited. He shared lots about the story. He was devastated with how it ended, I think. I know. I had no idea. I should read it now. But when I asked him which one, and he is not my one that gets eager about learning at all. You know, you have him in your class. But I said, which one would you pick? And I expected him to pick Wonders. And he said, but I think I'm better at spelling now because of Amplify. And so I thought, that is the one I hope we pick. Because he really did hold himself accountable a little bit more with that. Plus the family component of it. I really appreciated that. And my first grader, I would say too, that his confidence just during those few weeks in reading, he was like, I read chapter books now. And he just felt very confident in his ability to do that. So good work. I think it was well received.
Mine is more of a comment on how well that you guys worked together to do this, because I was able to come to just one night of the presentation, which was for the Wonders, which I loved it. I had a ball with you guys taking and doing that. And the questions you were asking was very point on about the different parts of it. And so from that aspect, I was kind of sad to see that Wonders was actually the second choice. But I did go to the West Room when everything was laid out, and I did see the CKLA. And after looking at that information, I'm going, oh, you know, and that was without even have had a chance to do it in a classroom. So basically what it tells me is you guys very seriously tried to look at what was the best components, not only for you as a teacher, but how the outcome would be for the students and parents, I guess, too, with it. So thank you for all that.
You reminded me of one of my comments too, Karen, is when I went and looked at it at the district office, I looked at Amplify and I honestly was a little intimidated by it. And I thought, this is very rigorous and I don't know that we will keep the attention of our littles. I was a little worried for you guys. I thought we're going to have behavior concerns. There's going to be outbreaks, because it was a lot, I think, kindergarten, one of the vocabulary words, it was like chalk. And I thought, well, that's actually kind of a pretty hard word. But I'm glad to be wrong, and I think our kids can meet the higher expectations. So it's really good to see.
It did really show that, because I was feeling the same way. Goodness, and the vocabulary was amazing, and the kids then would try to use it as much as possible within that week. Like, oh, I could, and it made them feel good about it, and they'd go home and use it with their parents, and yeah.
My kids even used it in math. One student said, "This is like the Don Quixote of math." If you've read it, you would understand. It's cute. It was fun.
Caleb, did you actually have the chance to be able to take any of these?
I took Springboard from 6th grade through 10th grade, and I'm a fan of Springboard as much as there were parts of it that annoyed me a lot. It flows really well into taking AP classes with College Board because it's obviously the same company, and so the way Springboard progresses, especially in English, it also to do with math, but especially in English, the way it progresses and how your assessments are done eventually winds up very similar to how AP testing is done in AP Lit and AP Lang. You move from, like, in 6th grade and mostly in middle school, we'd have, a few days to peer edit, do all those things with our essays that we were writing, and then eventually, once we would get into high school, we'd move into timed writes, which is how AP testing is. You'll get, 2-ish hours to write 3 essays, and you just gotta fit it within that time block. So you move into that style, which prepares you well, especially since Springboard is our honors curriculum for success in advanced placement courses.
Thank you.
I also took Journeys in 5th grade, and I disliked that a lot, so.
Any more question?
Just a clarification, the 6th, the 9th through 12 are one recommendation, then 7th and 8th are another. Will they eventually, they're going to get to one for all?
Yeah, so what it will be is amplify K-5, 6-8 Springboard, 9-12 into Lit.
Okay.
So I would say back on this slide, you'll notice that 6th grade's actual first choice was into Lit, their second choice was Springboard. And, I think it was a challenge. We had to come back together, really look at our feedback, but we made the decision to do a K-5 band, a 6-8 band, and a 9-12 band. So
Thank you.
we will be using writable, though, 6 on up, because that came back very clearly that was something they all wanted.
What is 6 currently using?
Springboard.
Springboard.
Yeah.
Is for 9-10 is into Lit the grade level and Springboard the honors level? Yeah. Or no, or is it all into Lit?
So in 9th grade, for pre-AP, they've been using Springboard. In 10th grade, we haven't been using Springboard the last 3 years. What we did in 10th grade pre-AP, because the Springboard units for grade 10 about 3-4 years ago didn't match up and weren't aligned into the AP standards. So with the permission of Mr. McGrory at the time, he let us develop an AP Lang curriculum and an AP Lit curriculum, like a mini semester each. And that's probably what you had, I'm guessing, last year.
Yeah, I like that. That was very good.
So right now, we're going to do into Lit, but try to keep the same kind of components as far as the assessments go, like that you got in the time rights to get ready for AP Lang. And I don't know if you're taking AP Lit next year or Comp. So
I'm taking Comp 1 and Comp 2. So.
All right, see you next
Sorry,
year.
Guerra.
We just need a counselor here for advice. Any other questions for the teachers? I know you have some, so I was waiting.
I don't have a question as much as I just want to clarify for everyone. This is not our curriculum. These are tools, and as Randy talked about, what they just did, what you just talked about, should happen all the time. These are the standards that we need to have taught. These are the tools that we are using to teach these standards. So, I mean, I wouldn't have a problem with having sixth grade do the Intellit, but I understand also that it's probably from a financial standpoint, having everybody do Springboard 6-8, great. But I don't think that we should be, these are tools to teach our curriculum. They are not the curriculum. These are not the standards. These are the tools we are using to teach them. So
And I would
how they
say-
match up best, great. And I really appreciate the amount of voice that we had in the whole process and the amount of involvement. Kudos to everybody that participated, everybody.
Yeah, and the teachers did engage in curriculum, looking at standards, the alignment before we looked at this adoption, so you are right. I think we had that conversation then too. Any other questions? I just want to end very quickly and just saying thank you to all the teachers and administrators because, you know, I did make the analogy, it is like flying a plane and building it in the air, and they had to do it twice with two different materials that they looked at, and so it was hard work, and they had to put a lot of extra time in, so I want to thank them, and for the teachers that aren't here, and the students that had to go through it all too, so we appreciate them.
Well,
Yeah, you want to say something? Yes, Vaughn.
It was a great process.
Can you move, please? Yeah.
It was a really great process, and I think that everybody felt like their voice was heard, so we appreciate that.
And that's what counts. I mean, that's a great ending, that everybody's voice was counted and heard. That's what we like to hear. So thank you all. Great teamwork, great job. So we look forward to continue to hear the success stories from each one of you. Thank you. Appreciate that. So moving forward with the still board targets and goals report, the second item that we have is facilities updates, and I assume Ryan is moving forward towards the podium now.
Thank you, guys. On your desk there, your table, I set forward some new timeline. As I was looking through this today, I noticed there's still some misprints on it, so we're going to go through and make some adjustments as we go through this. So I'm going to start with our controlled entrances because that will be the first project that is out for bid and will be in front of you guys. So tomorrow we have our first pre-bid meeting for those controlled entrances at Susan Clark, Grant, and Madison. So that will bring, I know there are at least 4 contractors that have pulled documents so far. So I expect those 4 will be in attendance tomorrow. We'll go through the sites, answer any questions that they have just so they can start to finalize their bids. Those bids should come back for our May meeting for approval. So that will start construction basically the day school gets out. We're slating those for about a 6-month window for construction. So we will start the school year at those 3 buildings with some adjusted entrances. We're working through those timelines right now to make sure that we get things up and running. We get hallways back for the kids so that we have all of those in place as we're building out the new entrances for those. Not overly concerned with Grant and Madison as far as that goes. Not a lot of interior renovation in those. Susan Clark is going to have a slightly different agenda because we are doing some more interior renovation in that building. So that's going to have to be really set in stone where that entrance is going to be and how we're going to manage that at the start of the school year. So we're hoping by, December, Christmas break, we can turn those whole buildings back over to the staff. The next one that's going to be coming to your for approval will be the wrestling room addition. We are finalizing construction documents right now. And that will go out for bid in the next couple weeks. We are going to need to call a special board meeting for that approval for you guys. So we're looking at May 18th right now for, I think, 15th, right? 15th? That 15th. May 15th for that approval. So then we can get started on that. Because we can start on the wrestling room addition anytime. The goal for that then is to get that back in operational by October so that it's ready for wrestling season to begin. You'll see on the wrestling room addition, it has construction running through the middle of November. That is an HVAC issue. The building itself, the room itself will be turned over. We're just going to be waiting on the rooftop unit. Now, potentially that could come in earlier. We could be in that earlier, but we'll have a temp setup going so that new addition will still have heat going on, but that permanent rooftop unit will not be in and probably until November 1. So just giving us some flexibility on that. Second or last, or not last, but then the Jefferson addition will be that third group of projects that comes out to you guys. So Jefferson, we're looking at bidding through June. And this is one of those this should be 6-1, not 7-1 for you guys. So we can start construction mid-June with that. And then again, that's about a year-long process. So we're looking at building throughout the entire next school year, turning that over to Jefferson for what would be the 24-25 school year. Remember, this is one of those things that we have to have in place because I only have the portable classroom at Madison through the end of next school year. So at that point in time, the city will no longer allow us to have that on site. So that's moving off so that we can move some classrooms to the Jefferson addition. Centralized kitchen, we have some walls up, some exterior walls. If you guys would like to walk through there at some point in time, send me an email, give me a call, I'll grab you a hard hat and we can walk through the site and show you around and what that's progressing. I'm excited to have that done. That timeline looks to be the end of July for a turnover date. So we'll be right at pushing that first of the school year to get started. Let's see here. Then probably the one that'll come up later, baseball, softball. So we're looking at designs with that. Again, having Bruner getting turned over to the district, and then the softball diamond on the lower field behind the football stadium at the high school. So those designs are getting finalized right now. We have a couple alternate bids that we'll be looking at with Bruner Field. But in looking at that, we'll be looking at starting construction on those projects after the season is over this summer. So middle of July for start of construction, having them in our hands by mid-March of next year.
So that's for Bruner or is that for both?
Both.
So you're thinking that we're not going to be going on to state or anything else?
I said potentially middle of
I'm just
July.
saying, you've already said that the season's not over in July.
Can't you theoretically start that softball one before that?
We could potentially start softball before, but we're still in that design phase, and then it takes a while to get some construction documents drawn up. I mean, as much as I would love to push the pace on that, we're still not going to have it done before next year, so I want to make sure that we do everything up front correctly so that we have less issues during that construction phase.
I think, again, it highlights the advantage of working with Leggett and Russell as we are having these meetings frequently, talking about, again, everybody's got eyes on this. They're saying from the industry standpoint, hey, we know right now steel frame doors are X number of months out, right? So do they need to adjust the bid process? Do we need to do an early bid package? All of those things, because they know, ultimately it's we need to turn those things over at a certain time, right? That's part of the reason we're going to have a special meeting to approve the bids for the wrestling room, so they can get those contracts out and get those started, because we know in November practice starts, and so we got to be done ahead of that time. So it has been a real advantage for us to have all those teams on board and have that frequent conversation about what's happening here.
Yeah, and that's like steel frame doors, 14 to 16 weeks. I would have no way of knowing that. So having that expertise has been really, really nice for us.
Ryan, I have a quick question for you. Like back to the first item you spoke about, the controlled entrances.
Yes.
Now, as you said, the plan is to start June 5th, but obviously this is going to take us till the end of the year. So during the fall semester, we're going to have temporary entrance, right? Tell us something about perhaps maybe the safety issue now, designing those temporary.
Yeah. So where this is going to come into play at, so Madison and Grant, for example, we're going to have to do emergency egress through that construction. So one of the first things that we're going to be working on is that new hallway exit, so that we can get that opened back up while they're finishing like the office space and the nurses space, so that in the event of an emergency, kids can still exit that area per fire code. Now, we know though that that's not something that we want to use very often, so we'll design so that they come in a different door at the start of their day. Maybe they come in at the playground at Grant. For Madison, they can come in at down closer to the octagon. So there's different things that we can do for egress. Susan Clark, we know that because we're doing more interior renovation with their main office, their nurse's office, their counselor's offices, we're going to have to design. So potentially the plan for that is to get the new bathrooms, the new nurse's suite, and the existing nurse's suite done prior to the start of the school year, so that we can shift administrators to the current nurses area. We can move the nurse into her new area. We have the bathrooms in place, and we'll probably have to move the main office to a classroom, at least for the start of the year, where they can enter on the doors closer to McKinley, be able to have a relatively secure entrance into that building, and then move on. So until we can get that new secure controlled entrance open to the staff.
And again,
Thank you.
The buildings are all aware of this, and they've been working with Ryan, working with Russell and Leggett on, hey, we know for a period of time, we're going to have to change our traffic pattern. We're going to have to change some things. We know that's coming, so they've been talking about that for a while. So it won't be like first day of school, oh boy, what do we do now, right? Because we have to communicate that to parents and to staff, and again, that'll take some adjustment.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the most exciting things for me as a former Grant parent is the parking lot work at Grant, and being able to circle around that is going to be great for that building.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Any other question for Ryan? Okay, thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate that. Thanks. Okay, moving forward, our superintendent updates.
And just very brief updates this week. Just a quick update. We talked about this in community conversations. From a staffing standpoint for teachers right now, we're at 96.5%, right around there. So feeling really good about where we're at relative to the time of year for staffing for next year. Again, kudos to our HR department, to our building staff, in terms of getting things out there, getting interviews, and just being very proactive through that whole process. So I think we're in a good spot there. I have been doing a legislative update kind of each time we meet. There hasn't been a lot happening over the last couple of weeks. It's been pretty quiet. So I guess, sometime from the last time we talked, we were kind of looking at that Senate File 251. That did not come out of the House. So it's considered that it didn't make the funnel, but like all things, it's not really dead. It could pop up somewhere else, but at least for right now, that particular bill is not moving forward. So we'll continue we get updates, legislative updates weekly. We'll continue to share those with you. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any question for? Okay. Thank you. Moving forward to our next item on our agenda, action and possible action. The following items are considered to be routine by the Board of Education and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a director so requests. in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence from the agenda. The items are 1, minutes, number 2, employment recommendations, number 3, bills and claims, number 4, education contract, number 5, policies, no minimal required by law, number 6, AEA purchasing agreement, number 7, agreement with AEA driver education, number 8, MCSD and Morningside agreement, number 9, interfund transfer from GF to Pepper, and number 10, third and final readings on policies. What are the wishes of the board?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
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 Oppose? Okay, motion carried. So we move into item L on our agenda for tonight, which is to approve certifying the budget for 2023-24 school year with a total levy rate of $13.2293 and budget of $131,977,925. And I see Tom is already there. So first of all, do we have any information or should we have a motion?
Just to clarify, it is $13, not
you for
13,
noticing
not
that.
13,220, okay.
It's 13.2293.
That would be a heck of a rate, and I don't think
It is on your board documents that.
Okay.
In that document, it's 13 point.
Yeah,
Yeah,
$13.
It's $13, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're 132,293. It's a heck of a rate.
It's not that.
I will make the motion to approve certifying the budget for the 23 to 24 school year with a total levy rate of $13.2293. I don't know how to say that, cents, and budget of $131,977,925. It's a lot of numbers.
So we have a motion? Second. Okay. Any discussion? And Tom?
I was just, didn't know if you had any questions. I'm just, in the board packet is some documents that are used to generate the budget for 2024. So you see there the proposed levy rate on page 2, and that's comparing the prior 2 fiscal years. And it seems like forever and a day ago since we talked in February, but just it changed slightly since then. So if you don't have any other questions.
Tom, do you have any concerns or any things that you're going to be closely monitoring or that we should be closely monitoring in the next year?
Yep, so great question. So FY24 is the ESSER dollars go through actually September of 2024, which goes into our fiscal 25 for 3 months. So that is something that we will be monitoring closely and figuring out our next steps for the following fiscal year. So, in the construction project, so one of the challenges with budgeting wise is the timing of expenditures, and because our fiscal year ends in June, that's when a lot of construction happens. So hence why we're going to amend our budget for this year also. But you guys get that report every month of Fund 34, I believe, which is our construction fund with those projects going on. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second, we are done with discussion. So all those in favor of approving and certifying the budget for 2023-24 school years with a total levy rate of $13.2293 and budget of $131,977,925. Please signify by saying aye.
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 Oppose? Okay, motion carried. Next item is to set a public hearing to amend the FY23 budget for Monday, May 8, 2023 at 7 p.m. at City Hall in the council chamber. What are the wishes of the board?
Make a motion to set a public hearing to amend the fiscal year 23 budget for Monday, May 8, 2023 at 7 p.m. at City Hall and council chambers.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of setting a public hearing to amend the FY23 budget for Monday, May 8, 2023 at 7 p.m. at the City Hall in council chamber, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, motion carried. Moving forward, to approve a purchase agreement between the City of Muscatine and the Muscatine Community School District related to the purchase and transfer of city property, parcel number 303410001, known as Tom Bruner Field. What are the wishes of the board?
I'll make the motion to approve the purchase between the City of Muscatine and Muscatine Community School District related to the purchase of transfer of the city property, parcel number 303410001, known as Tom Bruner Field.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we
Second.
Have a we have a second. Any discussion?
So you have the agreement there. It's pretty standard stuff, similar to what we did for the Ag Learning Center, for the centralized kitchen. The only difference here, so you have that map that I sent along, and there's some different colors there. So when this was originally platted, obviously some things have changed there since then. So you can see there's, when this was originally done, the bike path, I'm assuming, wasn't there. So at that time, it didn't really matter, but now that we're, making some adjustments here, that falls within that platted piece. Well, the city needs right-of-way for that path. So we'll approve this, after it's surveyed, when the agreement is for that space, then after that's done, there'll just be a few extra kind of steps that we'll have to go through. So we'll have to deed access to that portion of the area there. Obviously, there's a big chunk of outfield and fence that sit actually on city property once this is done. So we'll get this initial agreement in place, then they'll kind of deed that to us. So again, probably a couple more steps than what would be typical. It's just the nature of how this thing lays out. So asking for approval tonight from the district standpoint for the agreement. And that really gets the ball rolling. The city council will have this on their agenda for Thursday night, so I'll be present for that. And they'll be, as we kind of go through the process and try to update you. I've been working with Carol Webb from the city on just next steps, and we'll kind of keep you posted on that. Really, once we get this agreement done, it allows us to move forward on all the bidding process for all intents and purposes. We know we're all heading in the same direction, so.
So on the contract, it says $250. That, then we have some additional funds that we would also be charged for surveying and all that?
Yeah, and that was, just like we did with the Ag Learning Center, we're responsible for paying that,
Right.
particular fee. Yep.
Done a lot of activity on this, the softball, between the city council and your staff, and just thanks for all that. It's been a long process to get here, but glad it's going in the right direction.
I think, everyone's going to feel good about it. It's going to be a great, site. Softball's going to have a great site. In the end, it accomplishes everything we wanted to, right? And so something the community can really be proud of.
I'm anxious, I guess I personally am anxious to get this going, because I know that, we're putting money into Bruner right now, and to actually own the property ourselves will be a lot more beneficial to us.
Yeah. And again, for our neighbors down there, it's going to make a positive impact for them. As we put up the netting, we add some parking, and the field's going to look great.
Mm-hmm.
Great for the community, great for our kids, great for the program.
Okay, thank you. Great discussion. All those in favor of approving a purchase agreement between the City of Muscatine and the Muscatine Community School District related to the purchase and transfer of city property, parcel number 303410001, known as Tom Brunner Field. Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. So moving forward, we move into our discussion and information piece of our agenda. And the first item is March financials. And Tom, all yours.
Okay. So yeah, presented tonight are our March financials. Tonight we had the public hearing and approved the FY24 budget, so thank you. And we set a meeting to amend this year's budget. So I don't have any comments or red flags about anything, so I'll fast forward to page 5. And that is a document that is used to monitor our actual expenditures compared to our published budget. So there's 4 functional categories that we're required to stay within that published budget amount that was done in April of 2022. So the proposal is going to be to increase those functional categories by those designated amounts for various reasons, such as, ESSER expenditures, increased food costs. Depending on the timing of construction projects, I want to make sure we are within whatever budget we amend, as well as potentially some curriculum cycle expenditures will also affect this budget. So this document then will, well, not this document, but we'll publish a budget, an amendment. Remember, it says right in the language that it doesn't affect property taxes for this year or next year. It's all being used with current resources that we have. So, and that's all I have, unless you have any questions. So, thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Okay, second item under discussion and information is the second reading of policies. 601.3, talented and gifted. 601.4, summer school instruction. 900.4, visitation by students, adults, groups, or agencies to the Muscatine Community School District. 900.6, outside resource people. Any question about any of the policies as well going through the second reading?
I have a question on 900.4 with the visitation. Couple things. One, is this going to need to change any after we've done some of these safety issues that we're looking to have with the schools? And then the way that I'm reading this is saying that we're required to notify the principal. Now, seriously, are the principals actually going to be available to answer the phone and be able to say, yes, go ahead and make sure Karen can come in? You know what I'm saying? Is then how that process is supposed to take and work. Because, I mean, there's been times when I just buzz the thing and they let me in, well, without even asking me my name.
So I don't think this changes the security procedures, and this was based on our conversation the last time we added that piece of 24 hours, just so there's notice, especially when you're visiting classrooms, so, we're aware of, it's different than if you're just coming into the building to connect to the office. So, and that's not just school board members, that's parents, public, and so getting hold of the, principal to confirm that is what we put in
And I totally agree with that. You know, I have been visiting schools, and I'm not done this semester. So my plan is to visit every building. And before I go to any building, I send an email to the principal at least a week in advance and talk with them and ask them if that day, that time works or not, because I don't want to go to school and find out that, let's say, the principal is not around, for example, because that would be one of the people that I want to sit and talk with. So yeah, I think it's important to have that kind of communication. Any other question? Okay, as usual, if you have any question, please send them to Daphne, right? Yeah, okay, thank you. Item C, review administrative regulations, and we have only one item under that, 501.9R1, insufficient classroom space. Any question about that?
So again, this was based on conversations as we eliminated that particular policy. And really what that had in there was just, essentially what it did is take all of the students in the building and all the certified staff and divide it, and if it was more than 30, I mean, those. But that really doesn't, I mean, I think there's more specific here as to when we look, what do we try to do when we staff it? What do we, what is our goal when we're adding a para? When do we close that building for voluntary transfers or for open enrollment? And at what point would we look at splitting that section up? Now, again, that doesn't necessarily mean if we determine to split it, that they're going to create necessarily two distinct sections. For example, we have a building that has a 5th grade and a 6th grade that are large sections. And a staff member was added, and what that staff member does, as opposed to creating a split class, pushes in and supports core instruction during math, during reading, during those times, to ensure during that most critical instructional periods, they're doing that with the smallest number of students they can, right? So the building has some flexibility in that, but again, that's why we put it in as average, and these are guidelines. But it's a lot more informative even than what was in the previous policy.
Clint, I would hope that we would be considering weighted classroom sizes. I mean, I think that that's important instead of just bodies, because there's a reason that our special education students are weighted. They have more needs that would need to be met. So if we put more special education students into a classroom, that weighting should be considered, in my opinion.
Well, and that's a good point too. Sometimes the reported class size of a particular section, it may have 28 students. Well, there may be 3 special ed students that are assigned to that classroom that really aren't in that classroom. So it looks like it's a much bigger classroom. So all those things are looked at when we're going through.
Any other question? Okay, thank you.
Do staff, sorry, just one more question too. So I have talked about this with some staff members too, because I know when the policy was first on our agenda without these, I had talked to some employees in the district. And so just wanted to make sure, the only thing that I don't see too is, what is that process if a teacher were to want to make a recommendation or request extra help? Does that, or if they think they're close, or maybe it's that weighting that we're talking about that goes the opposite direction, where there are more needs in the classroom instead of getting pulled out, or is that process clear?
I would say they would, obviously that goes through the principal, and then that would come through us. And I would, starting now through probably into October, we're talking about staffing as we're monitoring those numbers. There's always going to be fluctuation, so there'll be a grade that looks big now, but when it comes back in the fall, it won't be quite as big, or there'll be one grade, if you don't want to have any more students show up, that's exactly the class number for the grade will show up. And so we have to make adjustments, and so that's something, again, I know this fall we had a whole lot of kindergarten kids that appeared out of nowhere. Right, and so those were conversations that we had during staffing with principals, and we added supports to them. So I think that's always part of the process, but it starts with talking to the building administrator.
Any other question? Okay, thank you. So the next item is the announcements, meetings, and events. April 20, 2023, 2 hours early dismissal. April 21st, 2023, teacher in service, no school. May 8, 2023, school board community conversation, 6 p.m. at City Hall lower level. And remember, this will be the last community conversation for this school year. We take June, July off, and we go back in August for this community conversation. And May 8, 2023, we'll have our regular board meeting at 7 p.m. here at the City Hall Council Chamber. Any?
Are we missing the joint?
Yes.
The joint meeting on there?
That should be.
That's the 27th?
That's the 27th, April 27th, yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So the joint board meeting will be the 27th of this month. Yeah. Anything else?
I'll add 2 announcements. The 21st, we have a community presentation on internet safety for parents. We have a speaker coming in, Officer Gomez. You can find him on Facebook too to learn more about that. And then a Muskie shout out to the FFA students today that represented Muscatine in the state convention. The state qualifiers, Bob Carver and Avery Schroeder. Bob won silver and Avery won gold today. And then also in attendance are delegates Andy Frankie and Corwin McDonald.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Anything else? Okay, if there's nothing else, can we have a motion to adjourn, please?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Okay, those of you who are in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, good night, everybody.